Looks like we have everyone here. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Certifiably Sustainable, where we hope to explain and break down some of the reasons and processes of certifications for sustainable materials. Before we begin, I want to share with you some general information. The Zoom large meeting platform that we are using today will only access our panelists' cameras and microphones, while attendees will be muted unless specifically requested. But while we cannot see or hear you, we'd love to know that you are there, and we will collect questions throughout the session via the chat function, which you should be able to find at the bottom of your screen, and we will save time at the end for questions. We are also filming this webinar. The link to the video will be posted on the PREFACE website afterwards, where you can find more information about our show, today's webinar, and our panelists. My name is Betsy Frangiola. Excuse me, letting more people in. My name is Betsy Frangiola, and I am the founder of PREFACE and the owner of Betsy Frangiola Fabric Studio, BFF Studio. PREFACE is a fabric trend show launched in 2018. As the name suggests, it is about the beginning, where our goal is to provide a wide variety of inspiration and all the tools needed to begin one's own design story and create a seasonal collection, including fabrics, visual trends, color, vintage garments, original print designs, craft workshops, and helpful information from industry leaders like today's webinar. This is our 6th PREFACE event and our 2nd in the age of COVID, where we have adapted from an in-person event to creating a show in a box. We call them our experience kits, and they include fabric swatches from participating mills, our exclusive trend and color guides, and an invitation to this webinar series. So thank you for participating. Ruth Kelly is our moderator today, and I couldn't have a lovelier partner with as much experience, knowledge, and passion about textiles, and someone who smiles even more than I do. She has been working in the apparel business for 30 years now, with jobs ranging from clothing manufacturers and brands such as Lululemon to focusing on how we can all be more sustainable. With her present work as a materials consultant and editor for Saks, a design agency and online textile publication, Ruth is always ready to have the real conversations needed to make it possible to shift the needle and make real change. And I love this side note, she's also a bit of a hippie and a yoga teacher. Today's panel is an incredible mix of people who come from all over the fashion industry, but also all over the world. We have Canada represented, Texas, North Carolina, and even Hong Kong. I want to thank them for taking the time to share with us today. And with that, I will let Ruth take over the introductions and the remainder of our time.
Thank you so much, Betsy. That was such a lovely intro. And hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good whatever. I'm going to start off the introductions, and I'm going to make our way, if you like, through the supply chain. So first of all, I'm going to introduce to you Joy Gruver. Joy is on the West Coast. Give us a wave, Joy. There she is. And Joy works for Eastman Chemicals for Naia. So Joy is bringing with her today her wealth of knowledge of what it takes for a fiber or yarn manufacturer to be able to certify their products and all that brings there. Then we're going to move along to the fabric to Six Cheung. Six is joining us from Hong Kong. Hi, Six.
Hi.
And Six is the owner of Chaintex, which is a knitting fabric mill out of Asia. So again, I'm sure Six, I'm really looking forward to everything you're going to bring to us in terms of your customers, and you're using lots of different yarns and things in there. Then we'll say hello to Ben Galphin, who's joining us from the Carolinas. And Ben is the founder of Outsider Innovation, and has had previous roles in brands. So Ben's wearing his kind of like two hats because he does a lot of work currently with various different mills, but also with brands. So he's kind of straddling that line. And last but by no means least, we have Joelle Mertens, also here in Vancouver. And Joelle is with the Sustainable I've had a bit of a brain there. Sustainable Apparel Coalition. Sorry about that, Joelle. And he's let me see if I get this right. Senior Manager of the Higg Product Tools. Is that right, Joelle? Did I get that right?
Yes, with the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and actually recently promoted to director now. So recent change.
Congratulations, right?
Congratulations.
Excellent. And then hopefully Lee Tyler will join us later. And Lee is with the Textile Exchange, and he has been, oh my gosh, working there since 2008. So he knows a lot about different certifications. So thank you, everyone, panel. And I think we're going to kick, let's see, we're going to throw this out there. We're going to kick it off with, why even bother? We're all here, we all know sustainability it's not a trend. It's a need to. I was very excited recently at ISPO. I was talking to Louisa Smith, who's one of the judges there, and one of their themes they have is that inclusivity is now a part of sustainability. You can't just have this extra category of, oh, this is like the sustainable bit over here. It has to be inbuilt to everything that we do. And indeed, in their judging criteria, they did that for ISPO this year. Everything, it was baked into everything, which is awesome. But why bother? I'm starting to see some articles, some people. It's almost like they're the anti-certificationers, right? that are out there. So I'm sure some people are thinking, that this is a big headache in terms of time and cost. So yeah, why bother? Oh, hey, there's Lee. Awesome, Lee. So glad you could join us. Take a breath. I'm sure you've been rushing around. So everyone, this is Lee Tyler. And Lee, as I said, is from Textile Exchange. Perfect timing, Lee. How are you doing?
Everyone.
No
I
worries.
was literally putting out fires and then looked up at the clock. I was like, oh.
I need to be somewhere, right? Okay. So Lee, I'm just going to throw this right out there. We were just talking about why bother with certification. It's a lot of, it takes a lot of time, money, effort, etc. So why even bother? Lee, did you want to
sure.
take that one? Thank you.
Dive right in. Appreciate it. Yep. So we are a standards body. So we have voluntary standards. And so we tell this story all the time of why would you even bother being certified. And we're usually talking to brands. And on our side, on one side of the organization, Textile Exchange helps you decide which sustainable materials you choose. And then the standards are there to make sure that you're getting what you paid for, is the basic function. So it's content tracking, full supply chain transparency and connection through transaction certificates to prevent substitution or to guarantee and back up what you're getting, what you pay for. So because money's involved, people lie. And that's basically why our standards started and kept growing.
And so, yeah, people lie. Six, is that something that you've experienced in your work?
Well, generally speaking, I believe one can't fully trust anyone who has incentive to cheat, right? But also from the other side of view, actually when you join the certification programs, the certifying bodies actually would help either the brands and retailers or even the suppliers to help set up the standards, to help them look for suitable supply chain chemicals being used, instead of finding your own team or hiring your own professionals to do all the job. So that basically would save a lot of cost or investment, especially for starter.
Yeah, no, interesting. And Joy, how about your point of view? Why bother? I mean,
yeah, I mean, from a fiber and yarn perspective, it helps provide merit and really buttons up the story, I think, of what we're trying to tell and what we're selling. So that the end customer knows what they're getting. So I think it's important for us as fiber and yarn producers to have these certifications that helps brands tell their story, and then they can tell their story to the consumer, and it just strengthens the whole story. So I think it's very important to have certifications and to join groups like Textile Exchange and SAC. You know, for us, we're affiliated with Canopy and the ZDHC on the Naia side of things, and the ISCC. And I just think it helps really justify everything that we're saying. We need those third-party contributors to so we cross our T's and dot our I's.
Yeah, cool. And Betsy, just while I'm going to check in with Ben now, is it possible that you could maybe share the little, don't worry guys, we're not doing a big PowerPoint. Well, we just do have a slide to show you some of the many bodies that are out there. So while Betsy does that, I'm just going to check in with you, Ben, and ask, you know, again, you've been you've worked at Patagonia, right? You know, a lot of people see them as the gold star of doing everything right in sustainability. So I'm sure you've had some great conversations, both past and present, as to why bother. Is there any thoughts that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, certainly. I think if you're starting with certifications, I think you need to take a step back and decide, as a company, what your values are, or looking at a specific product, as Joy mentioned, what story are you telling, or what's the purpose of the product? From there, it's much easier to think about certifications. So why bother? For me, as we've heard mentioned, it guarantees that what you're buying is what you think you're buying. And then on a more emotional level, certain certifications, the good ones, they're not all created equal, but there are many good ones that exist. I think many of them are on this slide here. Those certifications essentially show that your brand is standing behind that movement or the idea behind the certification, not just your product. It's easy to build a good product, and it's easy to build a good product sustainably, but to further a movement or improve the industry, you need to be more thoughtful and more intentional. And I think one way to do that, the easy way to do that, is to support the governing bodies behind some of these legitimate certifications.
Yeah, no, awesome. And thank you, Betsy, for sharing that. I think, you know, gosh, I'll be honest, you know, I think when I counted on that slide, and thank you, Lee, because Lee put that together, there was 21 different potential certifying bodies, and I was reading up some literature last night, and I think at one point, and don't quote me on this, in like 2009, there were like, you know, 38 potential, you know, certification bodies that you could use, you know, all the way from raw materials right through, you know, to garments. So it's a very you know, I find it's a very difficult journey. There's lots of acronyms there that people throw out, like, where do you go? I mean, Joelle, like, you know, at the Sustainable Coalition, like, what's the conversation, you know, around all of these different potential certifications that you can have?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think part of it is looking, as Ben was saying, like what are you trying to achieve with your product, with your messaging, with your story, whether that's specific product or whether that's, again, what are the main things you're really looking at a brand level. You know, am I interested in climate change? Am I interested in water? Am I interested in, you know, social and labor practices? There's going to be, and you're probably interested in all of these to a degree, but what are the key messages that you want to tell? And the different certifications there are going to help you meet different aspects of that in different ways. It's probably never going to get to a place where we have, you know, just one certification that says, hey, this is good, and you know, it considers everything. So there's always going to be a need for different types of certification. But what groups like Textile Exchange and SAC can help do is it has that community where you can ask people questions, understand the different options out there, and start to narrow the list. If we look at, you know, the range of potential certifications, there's many, but then if we look at the claims and the certifications behind them, there's kind of like the 80-20 rule of most people are leaning into a smaller number of certifications as the main place that they're going for different properties there.
So it's a good way, I'll just throw this out to the panel, so whoever wants to answer it. Is a good way to start for people to, when they're looking at all these certifications, and I like that, the 80-20 rule. It's a good way to think about, like, okay, well, what's the main fiber type I'm trying to certify? Like, should they think, oh, it's organic cotton, or it's a recycled poly, or it's a regenerated cellulosic? How do you start to, divide and conquer? Anyone got any thoughts on that?
Well, I think I'll take that, Ruth. I think you can look, so we're a man-made cellulose, and I think you can look at what other brands that you maybe aspire to be and see what they're doing as a good first step. See what NGOs they're affiliated with, see what kind of certifications they have that they're promoting, and then really use that as like a great starting point to tell your story from a startup brand perspective.
Yeah, that's great. And
I also want to add, first, out of all, talk to your supply chain first. Talk to your suppliers and see what certification they are doing or going to do. I don't think you want to start all over your new supply chain only because of certifications, right?
Yeah, no, that's a really good way, like, trying to act smart, right? Rather than trying to do everything by yourself. Yeah, Ben, you were going to add something?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what are you trying to do as a company or with your product? Because if you get recycled certification, but you're buying organic cotton, you can't get the recycled certification on your organic cotton. Or if you're, as a brand, you only sell polyester products, it doesn't make sense to be bothering your supply chain about organic certification. Now, everyone being certified in the highest tier of responsibility is better, but it is a lot of effort. It is a lot of money down the line. So you should probably focus your efforts to begin with, as Joelle has mentioned. And I will say, like, having been a party to creating, like, being in a brand who creates their own standards, it's not an easy thing to do for your brand, for your supply chain, for anyone involved. And if you can influence the Textile Exchange or the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, AATCC, whatever other industry body, to incorporate your needs into their standard, it's much easier than you building your own standard, paying for audits, paying for travel to all of the supply chain to verify that it's been implemented. So it's really a better idea to look at, as has been mentioned, the 80-20 rule, what's hitting most of what you need it to do. And then, yeah, if you need to take inspiration to sort the wheat from the chaff, talk to your colleagues and your peers in the industry. Most of the time, from a sustainability standpoint, brands will be open because the brands that are pursuing sustainability are doing it, generally speaking, for the right reasons, and will be willing to share that.
Yeah, that was one thing I've experienced, even in the highly competitive sportswear arena where, it's often you never get any sort of collaboration. Sustainability, it's a completely, different story. And, that leads me on to my next question is certification enough? I mean, we know, there are some huge goals that we have to get to really move the needle in our industry. And something that crosses my mind is, are we playing too small? Is it enough? How can we really help? Not to be doom and gloom, but we've got to be a little bit, I don't want to sugarcoat things either, right?
Yeah, I think I'm the doom and gloom guy, but
so Lee's the Debbie Downer.
Yeah, the Debbie Downer. I have that meme ready on my desktop to drop in at any
cool.
time. But the fact that we're a standards body, this sounds odd, but we do tell people it's not a silver bullet. You can't just certify your way out of responsibility. It's you as a designer, as a brand, or as a supply chain member. you have to be able to to participate in that and make decisions on behalf of your customers, because again, we know that customers can't or should not be responsible and will not influence, as it's been tried many times, or we would be well above 1% with organic cotton if we knew that consumers could actually drive that needle. But it really comes down to supply chain relationships and sending the demand signal that you will have a consistent buyer for your product to a farmer that needs to convert to organic, or from a recycler that needs to purchase from a particular socially acceptable collector or something like that. So those types of things have to be done outside of certification. Certification is just one part, one component of validating what you actually want to get out of the system.
Yeah, nice. Anyone, Joelle?
Yeah, I think kind of building on the is it enough, you know, most certifications are happening at the raw material level. If we look at something like recycled cotton, recycled content, whether cotton or polyester, nylon, all the different fibers. And then there's also the rest of the certifications that affect the rest of the supply chain, the manufacturing. And it is important, I think, to look at both those elements. You know, if we look at where we need to get to with carbon reductions, even if your raw material footprint went to 0, which of course is impossible, but that would only take out about 25% carbon. So there's absolutely a need to recognize that certifications help you along the way, and what they really help you do is streamline the process. Yes, they have a cost, but it's a shared cost amongst the entire industry that's using it. It's part of the reason that you see that grouping of standards, and why I think there's a lot of willingness to share information in the sustainability space, is that the more people using the same standard, the more we can affect change in a cost-efficient way.
I'd offer as well, like, the certification is a trailing component. Like, you didn't have organic cotton certification before you had organic cotton, and you didn't have organic cotton before somebody wanted to remove pesticides from their product. So starting with the idea and then moving into certification, like, you can't certify, like has been said, like, you can't certify your way into sustainability. You really have to have a goal and move towards it. And certification is a means of ensuring that you're making progress and contributing to the industry making progress. But you need to have an idea first.
I totally agree with you on that, Ben. So from a fibers perspective, you know, with Naia, we started as FSC and PEFC sourced wood pulp, and that's where we started. But through our brands pushing us on further certifications, we've now got involved with Canopy, which has only helped our processing and made us even better. So I think these certifications help push us in the right direction. So I think that it's a great starting point, and it's where we need to start to continue to drive and push fiber companies like myself, like ours.
And I guess, Joy, you know, I can just imagine, like, some of those conversations with the brand, like, you know, at Eastman, you must have been a little bit like, oh God, they're asking us, what do they want now, right? But then you're being held, like you say, it actually helped you, right? And that's what needs to happen. Yeah,
absolutely. It pushes us in the right direction of where we need to be, and making better sustainable choices, and thinking about circularity, thinking of how we can be a better company.
And Six,
I wasn't doing my job at Patagonia if I didn't have that reaction from my supply chain at least once every conversation.
So don't be afraid to ask, right? And you can ask in a nice way, but to really push it. Six, I'm sure your customers give you a bit of a hard time, hey, when it comes to sustainability?
It's not hard time, but I think we are getting more and more demand and requests on that area. Well, you know, joining all those certification programs do require suppliers or manufacturers. Although there are standards and requirements and monitoring and audits, but self-discipline is a very major part of the certification morale. So imagine, say, for example, organic cotton grower, they need to turn the crop, the land, into totally organic 3 years, I think. So they are doing nothing for 3 years until they get the cotton crop organic. So only when they found there are economic incentive, then they will decide to do it. But when they are ready, all of a sudden, in the market, people are selling genetic modified organic, and the price are so low that they don't get a premium. So they might simply decide to go back to conventional. So things happen on this manufacturing side as well. If we can, sell the product as a premium, not necessarily very high premium, but reasonably priced, then there's no incentive for the manufacturers to turn sustainable. So I think now the trend, or not the trend, but there are more movement about how to incorporate certification with things like traceability or verification or testing on the product to ensure this is exactly recycled from this plant, or this is organic from this farm, things like that.
I like that, Six. So that what you're saying is there's a lot of smart work that you can do in your certification, because having worked for a large brand that had a team to do this, it's still a huge mountain to climb. And even just the administration of, once you get those certificates come in, they'll have an expiry date, right? And how do you keep track of when they expire? Who's going to look after all of that? Who's made sure that especially on commodity items like wool and cotton, that you're hitting everything. Lee, Joel, is there anything that you wanted to add to maybe some little nuggets of advice to people when they're starting off, as to because I want to make sure we're giving some tips of where to start, maybe of things to avoid, warning flags. So I'll throw that out to you guys initially.
Sure, I can maybe, I'll speak to, so before I was at SAC, I was at a smaller brand, still
I
not
forgot to
tiny,
say that. Yeah.
but a smaller brand in Canada. I think you can definitely tackle it in chunks. I think Six already mentioned, like, if you know your supply chain, asking them what they already have available is a great place to start. Again, joining other industry associations and being able to understand what other people are doing is that good way to kind of help refine your, what do you want to focus on in the first place, then talking to your suppliers, seeing what they already have in place. And the end goal of certification is that you have the confidence in making the claims that that you want to make. So there is an ability to understand how far that certification extends, and look at it more from a taking a step back and saying, there's kind of scope certificates, are you able to offer this in the first place? Okay, I can check that. If I have a good relationship with you, I can have at least some level of trust that that's happening. I check the expiry dates on those, ultimately getting to transaction certificates, that being the highest proof that you're going to have. But if your supply chain already is scope certified and they're already able to do that, at that point, it's a matter of asking and just being able to follow through. And of course, yes, there's a cost to getting that information, but it also takes that off of your plate from having to manage the day-to-day of that. So as long as you're getting that transaction certificate for that production lot, somebody else has gone and basically verified that that's what the audits are doing.
Yeah. Anybody else like to add to any of that, Lee? Yeah,
that was definitely a great description, Joelle, because we're based with transaction certificates as well, of course. But the main thing that everybody seems to be repeating is that you have to actually talk to your supply chain, and that's the first step of sending a signal of what materials you're interested in, regardless of the standard. And if enough people send the signal, then they become certified because they can see the demand is there. So that after you've given the demand to your existing supply chain, you can also, of course, go and nominate new suppliers or find new suppliers that are certified off of those standards websites. That's a bit more to start up with a new supplier. But my main point of advice here is, if you do choose a new supplier, or if it's one that you are dealing with its new certified material for you that they've never really sold you certified material before, you can check with those certification bodies that are on the documentation. You can call them, email them, and make sure that it's a valid document, because there are fraudulent certificates presented to people, both scope and transaction. And I would have hard pressed time to actually identify a fake one at times when I created the template. So it's very, they're very advanced in what they try to do. So it's when you have another party involved like that certification body, just check with them. They're happy to answer and confirm that it is a true certificate. And on those transaction certificates, it names you as the buyer, ultimately, is why it's so secure, as nobody else can have used that volume. But that is all the way down at the end of the supply chain where everybody's fully certified. The costs have been already put into the system. So send the signal and then just call up the CBs to make sure you've got actual correct documentation.
Awesome. And Lee, could you just define scope and transaction certificates, just in case anybody's needs a refresher on those?
Yep, Joelle pointed it out that scope is the annual, and for us it's annual anyway. It could be like a 3-year certificate, but with some standards. But when a certification body comes and audits you at a facility, maybe brand level as well, even a farm, they will issue a scope certificate that says these are the parameters of your certification. Here's the process that you do, the products you can create. But that's all it is it says you can create those products.
Right. So it's like an umbrella, right, for what you're doing, and then the transaction is.
Yeah, that's the product certification, basically.
Got it.
The certification body will sign that document and said this product in particular is certified. We check the inputs compared to the outputs, and they submitted the input transaction certificates if there were any, or other validation documentation. We compared it to their processing. They demonstrated to us that they could not possibly have overproduced this volume, and they issued a transaction certificate. And that came out of organic food originally, like that was their system. And
okay,
we just copied it. So
yeah,
textiles.
Cool. And just one quick question, if I may. I'm just curious. In the world of COVID and travel, did anything need to happen in terms of the auditing? When going to do this, to go into facilities.
It's horrible to say, but it's been a great opportunity for us, and as a standards body and even certification bodies, to learn more about remote auditing and to go on camera and just walk through the facility. Because I would really hope that becomes, in use of new technology, that becomes the norm, that you can alleviate the auditing burden. And mostly, if you do need to show up on site, it's because there's a higher risk involved.
Yeah.
Or if it's like the first time that they are certified, that's a higher risk. So if we can get to risk-based auditing that does involve a lot more actual camera, remote, drones, satellites, anything like that will help reduce the cost and burden of the system, then that would be fantastic. So we've learned a lot this year, even just performing remote shadow audits ourselves.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, wouldn't that be great that the actual process itself is more green? It's kind of ironic, isn't it, that, in trying to set up these environmental standards that people, would have to fly, all around the world to do the audits, right?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is off topic, but we had bird flu concerns at down farms. Like the auditor physically moving from one farm to the next is a danger to the birds. So there's things out there, and of course COVID would transfer from person to person, but it is not just a financial or carbon issue. There's actual risk for that type of thing and rare occasions, but all three of those issues are much alleviated with remote audits.
Just as we, that's brilliant. Thank you, Lee. Love all these little stories, are great. Just as we, start to wrap up the panel discussion, so we can leave time, because I'm sure we've got lots of questions. So if you haven't already, people start to put your questions in the chat, and Betsy's our chat monitor. But one thing I wanted to, we'll do two more sort of questions. What should we go for next? So I think, not to call any particular body out, because I'm just cognizant that not everybody's here. But I just want to ask the panel: are there any warning signs, anything to avoid, right, for people who are looking at, potential new? And I'm sure there's been some bodies that have come and gone, or flash in the pan, or is there anything to avoid, or any warning signs, anything like that? Yeah,
Can I
Six.
try?
Yeah, please. Was that
Two
I
areas.
hope that question was. Did I land that right? But yeah.
Yeah, sure. I try to share from the supply side.
Yeah.
Two perspectives. One, this is a little on tips. When you browse on certification website, people, always try to look at what brands, retailers, and suppliers are on the list, are already members. But I add to that would be the proportion of number of retailers versus the number of suppliers. So you might find a certification that has a long list of suppliers, but a very, very narrow list of brands, or vice versa. Yeah. That actually represents something. So, but that will be a long story. I'm not going to explain here. Second is, if your supplier try to tell you, hey, I'm going to offer you recycle or organic or both at original price like the conventional ones, then you have to be careful.
Right.
That's what I'm going to share.
So you'd say about price, yeah, that would be a red flag into deeper. Yeah, Ben, have you got any thoughts, any insights?
I mean, I have had acute examples of making a move to a certified and verified supply chain that did not involve big price fluctuations or anything, but on average, it does involve a change. And it was a calculated business risk on the supplier's side to eat that, those fees so that we would maintain business with them, or exchange rates were more favorable this time around for price negotiations, so that they actually were making just as much, even though the dollar price is lower or something like that. But yeah, I think generally, like, if it seems too good to be true, you should ask more questions. And in that vein, as you're looking at this, it's the brand's responsibility to make sure that things are going well. And you should educate yourself, learn some about the questions that might be good to ask, and ask them. Just start asking them. And if your supply chain counterparts don't have good answers, or you don't like the answers they have, like, keep asking harder questions. If they start supplying really good answers, or that's clear that they understand how these bodies work, or that what the certification means or what's involved, they probably are doing it correctly. But if they said, oh no, it's super easy to deal with this thing, the farmer didn't have to do anything, that's probably not the correct answer. And it probably means it doesn't mean they're lying. It just means that you need to ask more questions and verify it. Hey, could I check out a certificate that you have for another customer, or go to someone like the SAC or the Textile Exchange, and hey, is this supplier prolific in your certification? To Six's comment, like, how much are they selling? How much are they buying? Like, do you have auditors there often? That kind of thing. Just start asking questions, and again, talk to your peers in the industry, because they can probably say, oh yeah, we worked with so and so, I don't know, it just didn't feel right. That's something good to listen to.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, go with your gut as well. If something doesn't feel right, then start to dig deeper and think, well, why is that?
And yeah, I mean, we came across times where our sales rep didn't know what they were saying, and the company was very committed to what we were asking them to do, and was doing it correctly, and we were just asking the wrong person. That happens, but it also happens that they're not committed to what they're saying, and you need to be able to know what questions to ask and ask them.
Yeah. Joy, have you got any? I'm sure you've got lots of nuggets to share.
Well, I think, I've been on the fabric side and the yarn side of the business now, and I think it's just really important, if you're a brand, to go deeper, like, ask the questions of your mills, and then, take what they say, but go deeper into it. Make sure that what they're claiming is true. With Naia or our Naia Renew, I would say, talk to the mill about it, because they're going to usually introduce you, but come talk to us, talk to the, the fiber suppliers, try to go as deep as possible to make sure that everything that you're being given is true, because at the end of the day, you're going to put your name on it. So you want to make sure that your story is buttoned up.
Yeah, our complex supply chains for sure are a challenge, aren't they? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. And then lastly, let's as we wrap this up, so we leave some time for questions, I wanted to just ask the panel, like, what are their hopes for the future? What are you excited about in this space of certifying raw materials? And what pieces of hope can we have out there as an antidote to our doom and gloom, or or maybe just like one piece of advice? Yeah.
I'm excited for more diverse material inputs for recycled content. So traditionally, a lot of it comes from industrial efficiency or industrial waste because it's clean and easy to get. And while that shouldn't be burned or shouldn't be landfilled, that's kind of the lowest form of recycling in my mind. And then you look at other certifications that start to say this came off of a beach, or this came off the ground. And that's growing. That's a really cool movement. And I think that's where that gets to the original intent of recycling, in my opinion, is this is certifiable waste valorization and landfill diversion. And that's really what you're aiming for. And I see more of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can confirm off of that one, or jump off of that. That's great, Ben, because that's circularity, I guess, is what we're really looking for. And we're excited about the advances in chemical recycling that everybody has, that you're able to actually take mixed blends and be able to chemically recycle those. So hopefully that will come to scale and actually be useful for the industry. That's what our excitement is, apart from general technology advancements all around for certification, but I'll leave it at that.
I'm totally on board with both of you guys. Eastman has just made some public announcements around our circularity achievements and where we're going to satisfy the needs of the polyester problem, the plastic problem that we have out there in the US specifically. But I am super excited about where we're going with circularity. I think that there actually does need, there's ISCC, and we're working around mass balance. But I think that as circularity comes up with when we come up with solutions in the textile realm of things, I think that certifications are going to be important. So to help you guys tell your story, but circularity, I'm with both of you guys. I'm excited about what's going on there.
I think we'd be remiss to also not mention regenerative. There's so much happening in the regenerative agriculture space with right now in the textile space, it's mostly cotton, but you see it on wool as well. And yeah, I think we're probably only a few years away from regenerative bio-based synthetics. And in my mind, that would be kind of your highest order of environmental responsibility, is undoing what we've done, not just mitigating it.
Yeah, so as these new supply chains, these new fibers, these new fabrics come out, right? There's, even more opportunity for the certifications to evolve and grow. Six, what are you?
Definitely. The more I get involved in the recycling business, more I learn, and actually the recycling is very complicated. And as Lee mentioned, now the technology allows the chemical recycling of blended fabric waste. That's a very big breakthrough. But still, there are room for a lot of technological advancement and cost-saving processes. I mentioned earlier the traceability, say like adding tracer, or even verifying the isotope at the farm level. that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And also Textile Exchange and I forgot the name, Organic Accelerator. I forgot the name.
Organic Cotton Accelerator. Okay.
Yeah. They jointly announced the GMO testing in, I think, 19 or 20 something labs over the world. Now you can verify whether there's a genetic modified materials in your organic cotton. So that's a big breakthrough. Well, down the road, when more and more certification are in place and more technology which allow people to verify the product, these two working with two legs will definitely help the whole sustainable textile world. Yeah, my wish is everybody are doing nothing but, you know, recycle or sustainable related thing. At the end of the day, polyester, I believe, will be out of market soon, because one day when car industry, they no longer produce petroleum driven, gas car. So every car will be electric. Imagine people won't dig into ground or the ocean to retrieve the oil, right? Without oil or petroleum, there will be no polyester. Supply will be lower, and demand, if still there, the price will be very high. So even plastic bottles, there will be tax on in a lot of countries, government, I think. So I think the cost of doing recycled poly or virgin poly will become higher and higher. So yeah, I agree with Joy on cellulosic.
Lee, Joelle, just quickly, because we've got some great questions I can see in the chat I'd love to get to. Just want to quickly wrap up your final thoughts.
I think mine would just be that, you know, what's really encouraging is the expansion of availability of the standards that are out there, and then also the depth, which kind of already been spoken to, right? It used to be like organic was kind of the top layer that you could get, and now there's even that regenerative layer beyond that. So we're getting, and same in the recycling space, right? Recycling used to be, you know, can I get some pop bottles or maybe some industrial scrap? That was probably even second layer, and now we're into the chemical recycling. So the depth of being able to get really high quality, low impact options is just growing.
Awesome. Lee?
You ready for the doom and gloom?
No, come on.
Something inspirational. I'll see what I can do. The main thing, the past 2 years, we've seen a real tipping point for interest in sustainable materials that was not there before. Like, it was reflected in our membership and certification.
Wow, that's
to
awesome.
A shocking degree, and number of attendees at our conferences. Like since 2017, you can just see this exponential growth curve, which is great. That's everybody's interested, and it's just a matter of actually doing it, and doing it credibly is of course, our concern. And we have the 2030 target. This is just to mention our strategic target of we need to reduce carbon emissions by 45% in textiles. In particular, the raw materials is what our focus is. And Joelle mentioned that that's only going to get you so far. We need partners with the entire supply chain for processing as well, just to be able, and of course, circularity, end of life, all of that has to be done together. And then regenerative has been said, can't leave that out, that you actually have to go and restore what damage you've done. So all of that together, it is possible. The scientists say it's possible, but everybody does need to collaborate and partner and work pre-competitively in order to accomplish that goal within the short time that we have left. There's the doom and gloom by 2030.
What's a reality check, right?
Yeah,
you know? Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thank you. Okay, I can see some of the questions. That's from Natalie. Natalie had asked, do you have a suggestion of how much recycled fiber you need in a fabric to claim it is recycled? Yeah, great question. You don't want to just be picking the shavings off the factory floor, right?
Our CS would be 5%, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a minimum 5%, but to make a claim for GRS, which is the full product claim, you have to have 50% to actually put the logo on it. at a minimum 20% to be certified to the GRS. But that's why we have the RCS, is so that people could blend in 5%. Maybe they don't talk about it just because it sounds like greenwashing, but it is possible to blend that in. And that's a good program. Like Nike did that with organic. They blended in a very tiny percentage for years and didn't tell anybody about it. And that grew the demand for organic cotton. So that's always the premier example of why we use 5% so low.
Yeah, so something is better than nothing, right? But the more the better, I guess. Eva was asking, what are the coming existing standards for biodegradable poly fabrics that I should be aware of?
So I can take this. I looked a little bit into so I think there's a couple layers of biodegradable. First off, one thing to just realize when we talk of biodegradable is that, of course, that's for the raw material. You also want to be aware of what processing you're putting on top of that. So a lot of processing involves synthetic chemistry, other polymers that the fiber may still break down, but what is the result of that if I'm putting on, you know, a plastic coating to make it wrinkle resistant, or, you know, water repellency finishes. So really, if you're wanting to make biodegradable claims, really, I think about the full end of what you're putting into the material, specifically to poly and let's call them synthetics that don't typically biodegrade. There's a whole range of compostability to biodegradability standards. Compostability standards, there's many areas of the world where there's composting programs that can theoretically take those. With the biodegradable and landfill standards, those are actually, if you read the standard, they refer to a type of landfill that's not really a landfill, it's a bioreactor. I have not seen any polyester that I would truly consider biodegradable.
Interesting.
That's my hot take on that topic.
There's a challenge.
I used to work with people a lot smarter than myself, and that was
you're just with the dumb ones now, like us. Hey, Ben.
Oh man.
I'm just joking.
But yeah, that was essentially the short answer. Was right now there's not a really good solution. There are some that in specific conditions will behave as they're intended to. At the moment, that area, in my opinion, for claims and standards is kind of the Wild West, and approach carefully.
What do you guys think about TUV in Austria as a certification for biodegradability? That's something that Naia is certified for, and we kind of looked at what others are doing. We believed we were biodegradable, and sure enough, we were. So we are able to make those claims. What do you feel about TUV as a certification?
So I think they are they're a test lab, right, that has basically refined the criteria. And again, I think the important difference is looking at what biodegradability standard has been, or what standard has been tested to. There's many biodegradable claims out there for, you know, things like, you know, natural fibers that are compostable, and the method that's being used is a composting method versus this bioreactor method that basically is it works if you have that technology. There's less than, I know specifically in Canada, there's like less than 0.1% of landfill capacity is that technology. It's a demonstration technology. It is not a real landfill technology. If you go to a landfill that has like the dig a pit, put some waste in, cover it with soil, dry tomb landfill, that biodegradability standard doesn't apply. So I think TUV, I don't know the full requirements they have, but I think this again speaks to the value of standards, is being able to see what are they doing, what are the requirements that they test, and then is that something that you as a brand feel comfortable making that claim.
And also talk about the biodegradability, not just landfills. People usually look at 4 conditions: landfills, soil, ocean, and wastewater treatment plant. These are the 4 major testing environment they will consider. And I don't see people could pass all, or not even close, actually. The closest one I've heard is CICLO, CICLO. But I don't know how far they are going.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's the research I've done that it's a very new and complex area. So I guess, important to keep in conversation with the community of what's happening there, right? Amy's got a great question. She says, it seems to be easier to certify physical material, yarns, trims, etc. But what about wash methods, printing, dyeing, and other processes or finishes that are being promoted by factories as more eco-friendly or lower impact to workers? And she said that's also the same for, colors and prints.
So I know this
Actually,
is what we're trying to
GOTS
do with
does.
the Higg MSI, is to have that type of data. So there are tools that are available. It might not be what you'd call certifying it because it's not a traceability scheme, but I think this is again another area of wild west of claims, is that I can speak about, oh well, this specific process is lower impact, but if I'm not talking about what it takes to make the full material, it can be taken out of context. And that's where, for my position, I think being able to, especially as you get into like what's the water footprint, what's the carbon footprint, use tools like the Higg MSI to understand what that actually means, and also push suppliers to say like, hey, if you're making an eco-friendly claim, do you have the data to back that up? And sorry, Six, I think I cut you off there too.
No. Sorry. Well, actually, GOTS or GRS, they do have requirement on dyeing and chemicals. So they're not as specific as Blue Sign though, but they do require us to use. They have a white list of chemicals and dyes to be allowed to use. So
yeah, I think we're in the restricted substance area. We're still trying to identify hazardous and restricted substances with ZDHC, and it's not so much about is this one better environmentally or has a better efficiency. That we're not there with our standard, nor is GOTS. It's really just here's a bad chemical, don't use it.
Yeah, I think that seems to be how it is. It's like prevent the bad stuff from even being on the shelf, and if you can do that, hopefully the downstream products are built in a manner that's lower toxicity and generally focused on safer for the workers. Blue Sign does have some, from my understanding of the system, has some influence on the facilities. So what's your wastewater treatment protocol? How do you handle the effluents? Green screen, as was mentioned, ZDHC, ChemSec. These are all good places to look for RSL or restricted substance list input or management schemes, which help influence that. But short of like actually putting tracers in these things, it is tough because it's not like a thing. It's a process, and you almost have to be looking at it. So they manage it through upstream. Just you can't even have this chemical in your container if you want to be certified.
Yeah.
Lee, there's a question here specifically for you from Jessica. She said, are raw materials the focus because that's where the biggest impact of sustainability is?
For Textile Exchange, no, that's just our area of expertise. We had to choose a swim lane, as we say, to not be doing duplicative effort with SAC or any of the other organizations out there. The numbers we saw were like 15% of the impact, but I heard Joelle say 25, and I've heard higher numbers as well, is at the raw material stage. And then there's the processing has a huge impact, and then end of life is another large area of impact for total impact of a product. But Joelle probably has a better answer for processing.
Yeah, it just all depends how, when we say sustainability, what type of sustainability are we talking about? Are we talking about carbon footprint, water footprint, impact on people? If we're talking about number of people involved in the supply chain, raw materials and, cut and sew are the biggest areas there. If we're talking about water and greenhouse gases, actually the intermediate processing is really important. So raw materials is, my opinion, probably the place where most people start because there is the most maturity of claims tracing and then also content disclosure. You're already, as a brand, having to know, the type of fiber that's in your product because that's what the law requires. So being able to go to your supply chain and say like, hey, do you know, can I switch this from cotton to organic cotton? There's already some mechanisms there. You're building on that with the certifications, whereas getting into the processing of like, can you use a low water wash process? There's not the same ability to trace that at the moment.
Yeah, brilliant.
Once you get into like life cycle analysis and and defining your start and end points for what you're talking about, it opens up a whole new world of questions to ask. But I mean, some of the papers that I've seen for the product creation phase, creating the raw material for certain types of products is up to 70 or 80% of the product's impact. And then over the course of the life, if it's a very durable material, the actual impact of the product comes from wearing and washing it from the user, right? So it really depends on what your bounds are as well.
Yeah, and just to call out, we are at the bottom of the hour. If anybody does need to jump off, we've got 2 more questions I'd love to finish if the panel's okay for just hanging on for a few more minutes, because we'll keep recording. And just to say that, yeah, you know, the whole sustainability is huge, isn't it? And you know, that's why we picked today to talk about raw material certification, because there's so many different ways that you can slice and dice this. We had to pick something that we can at least cover and not just talk so, you know, theoretically about, and could give some actual good nuggets of advice. So one question from Sarah: to what extent should brands be aware of system certification versus material certification? Is buying certified raw materials enough?
Well, from the supply side, my suggestion is, first thing, brand should get certified first. If not, then they might not know how to ask the right question, and they might not get the certification they supposed to have. So sometimes my customers, they are not certified as GOTS or GRS, but they do ask for a transaction shirt for the yarn or for the fabric. But to me, they don't even ask the garment manufacturer to be certified. So I think that worked in the past, but going onwards, that will leave a lot of room for people to cheat. So I would highly recommend brands to start certified first, and then the garment factory as well.
Awesome.
Doesn't it come back to what your story is, right? What's important
Absolutely.
to you as a brand? That's where you really need to figure out if you're a startup brand, and even if you're an existing brand that's been around for a long time and now you want to play in the sustainability space. It's like, okay, who do you want to be as you grow up? You have to start somewhere. Where do you want to start? And I personally have seen a lot of brands who have been around for a little while, and they feel like they have to become a big sustainable company, but it's not about that. It's about starting small and growing, right? You can't be everything to everyone, but you can start making a start. You can start making a start, if that makes sense. And it's a journey, right? We're all on this journey together to try to make the world better and hit our goals of 2030. So I think everybody needs to figure out what's important to you and get started, get going.
Yeah, and this leads us lovely into our last question from Cynthia, who says, as a startup that may only be able to incorporate 1 or 2 types of certification, which one would you recommend?
I think it really comes back to your story. What are you trying to do? What is the most important thing to your brand? You know, if you're let's say a social justice brand and that's really important to you, you're probably going to be more likely to focus on something like, you know, fair trade certification.
Mm-hmm.
If you're really interested in the, you know, chemical footprint of your product, that's where looking at things right from the raw material and looking at things like organic certification, and then also, you know, what's happening in the supply chain, whether that's Blue Sign or some of the other certifications there. If you're looking at just overall, hey, I'm going to focus on what goes into my products, the materials. I mean, if we look at the 3 top areas, I think it's like recycled content for any synthetic, organic for any cotton, and then anything animal welfare related for any animal-based fiber are kind of the 3 big themes there, but it really does depend on that story.
Don't forget about your man-made cellulose, Joel.
Sorry, yes, man-made cellulosics and the forest practices. Yes.
I'd recommend starting by knowing what's in your product. Once you, like Joelle said, like once you have your story or you know what you're trying to convey as a company with your product or with your statements, then know what's in your product, because don't spend your time trying to certify the 15% of your fiber that's recycled if it's more important to you to certify the 85% that's cotton. And maybe that 85% is coming from 2 suppliers. You may be able to do more, have more impact on your line with less work if you're able to focus that energy. And I think that's where it's really important, as Joy has said as well, like, dig deeper, know where each thing's coming from, because you may be able to find a point in your supply chain where one certification can impact all of your supply chain or a lot of your materials.
Awesome.
Some interesting thing when you look at the website of certification program, you found some brands which are members, but then when you look at the website, they never promote that. So that basically means either they don't have a supplier which are certified, so they certify by themselves, I mean for themselves only, or they couldn't afford to buy the product, or something happened in the middle that they couldn't get the product certified. So that's something really, really interesting to look at. Why a member of a certain certifying body, I mean the brands, do not promote in their website that they are certified.
It's a good warning sign. I like that one.
Yeah, I've also, in fairness though, I've also come across, yeah, it's interesting. Almost like a stealth approach of, you know, well, we want to do good, we want to start that journey. We're worried because maybe we can't have all of our product to be, you know, certified. You know, going back to the example, I'm not saying that they do this, by the way, but the Nike example of folding in some of the organic cotton in there. I've come across brands that don't want to tell too much of a story initially until they've got a certain amount of product, because they're worried about it might look like greenwashing, you know, which is which I have seen as another reason. But you're completely right. It could also be that they've had issues, and that's a warning sign too.
Yeah, I got a customer who just registered as Blue Sign. Then he started asking whether we are Blue Sign certified. But we said no. Blue Sign are more in a bigger scale and a lot of investment involved.
Yeah.
So for smaller mills like us, we couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
But there's probably things that you do, Six, right, that are doing the right thing, right? So so that's where you need to be able to talk to the brands about what you do right, even though you don't pay for that kind of certification, because I know that you do good things.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. You have to ask these questions
we
of your
play
mills,
the trick.
right?
We will provide an option to my customer. Hey, we can use Blue Sign certified chemicals, although we are not Blue Sign certified factory. So you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So here's the list of chemical or dyes that we could use, which are Blue Sign certified, but we are not Blue Sign certified as a company.
Great. Well, thank you so much to the panel. I've learned a lot today. Thank you everybody who joined. I hope you've learned lots as well. Thank you for the amazing questions. And Betsy, closing words to you. Oh, look at that, Lee's got luck. Little celebration.
No, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I think, like we talked about, it's interest that is driving the change. And so without everybody continuing to ask these questions, you know, we won't make more progress. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.